Okay, we're on our very last video of the unit. This last one is going to talk us through the law of syllogism. This is one of the laws of deductive reasoning. Okay, the law of syllogism, much like the law of detachment, has its own pattern. The law of syllogism is based on two premises. Premises are just statements that we accept as true, and they form a conclusion. Here's the pattern of the law of syllogism. We'll start with a conditional statement. If P, then Q. Statement 2 is very important. Statement 2 is a second conditional statement. However, it starts with the conclusion from the first statement and finishes with a third separate idea. Here we have three ideas running at all times. The conclusion simply knocks out this middle statement and connects the first to the last. Whew, that looks tough. Let's see what that could sound like in some examples. If it continues to rain, then the soccer field will become wet and muddy. Well, if the soccer field becomes wet and muddy, then the game will be canceled. Let's pause right there. Show you how this pattern works. This statement at the end of the first conditional statement is repeated as the hypothesis of the second conditional statement. Therefore, it connects these two statements together by stating, if it continues to rain, then the game will be canceled. The job of the Q statement is simply to connect P to R. Let's read it all the way through now. If it continues to rain, then the soccer field will become wet and muddy. If the soccer field becomes wet and muddy, then the game will be canceled. Therefore, if it continues to rain, then the game will be canceled. Seems like a logical argument to me. Let's go again. If the bank robber steals the money, then the sheriff will track him down. And if the sheriff tracks him down, then the bank robber will get arrested. Now, here's that connective statement again. The sheriff will track him down. That shows up as the conclusion of the first statement and the hypothesis of the second statement. Its job is to connect P to R. Let's write that out. If the bank robber steals the money, then he will get arrested. All right. One final example for you. A geometry example. If two chords are equidistant from the center of a circle, then the chords are congruent. And if two chords are congruent, then the corresponding intercepted arcs are also congruent. Ooh, that sounds like a really mean theorem we did a couple weeks ago. Let's use our law of syllogism to build a logical conclusion. The chords are congruent is the repeated phrase. The job of the repeated phrase is to connect the first thought to the last thought. So I've given myself a little more room to write here. This was a long one. I'm going to pause the video, write my answers, and then we'll read it. Okay, I've got my final conclusion on paper here. Let's read it all the way through. Statement 1. If two chords are equidistant from the center of the circle, then the chords are congruent. Statement 2. If two chords are congruent, then the corresponding intercepted arcs are congruent. That repeated phrase helps me connect the first idea to the last idea. So here's my final conclusion. If two chords are equidistant from the center of the circle, then the corresponding intercepted arcs are congruent. If you would like to see what that means in circle language, come see me. I'd be happy to explain it to you. But this concludes our lesson about the law of syllogism. One thing I want to add on here, if you are thinking that this sounds like something else you've done along the way in math, you are exactly right. I want to compare this to the transitive property real quick. Transitive property states if A is equal to B and B is equal to C, then A is equal to C. Remember that from algebra days? Here we have something super similar. If P leads to Q and Q leads to R, then it should make sense that P would lead to R. It's really following the same principle as the transitive property. So if that helps you remember it, I'm glad I mentioned it. Well, pause here. Give yourself your final checkup. Your independent practice is on a sheet that I have for you. When you're finished with it, make sure you come check it against my key and ask any questions so that we can make corrections together before you move on. Once you are totally finished with all 4 lessons and all the independent practice, you are then eligible to complete the quiz that's associated with this unit on power test. Happy studying!